Brian, I mean, because there's so much focus on the presidential race between Harris and Trump, we tend to forget that there are a lot of down-the-line ballot races as well. I'm coming to you live from the U.S. Capitol Hill. Do you reckon the sort of balance of power in Congress is also up at stake? I mean, right now, the Democrats control the Senate and the Republicans control the House. Do you see that changing depending on the result of the presidential election?
We could very well see Democrats controlling the House and Republicans controlling the Senate, a complete flip. Right now, all 435 House seats, they are up for election on Tuesday, and right now the GOP only has a 4-seat majority. There are a lot of competitive races to look at on the House side of things, so that could very well flip. Now, also, Republicans in the Senate side, they're positioned well to regain the majority, but we can't count the Democratic side out just yet. That flipping is not assured, but yes, we could very well see a flip of those two chambers of who will control the purse strings here in D.C. And then also keep in mind there are 10 states that have reproductive rights measures on their ballot. So reproductive rights, abortion rights, that is also on the ballot this cycle in 10 different states.
All right, Brian Abel, live for us from Washington, D.C. Thank you very much for joining us with your thoughts and perspectives. We'll be in touch with you as we count down the final 24 hours before polling begins. And like I said, Election Day in this day and age is a bit of a misnomer because already 75 million Americans have cast their vote early. This could be a crucial difference, whether through mail-in or through early in-person voting. That could be close to somewhere, some people are saying anywhere between a third and half of the total electorate, the total number of people who will finally have voted in the U.S. election. Let me speak to Max Abrams and try and get a sort of Republican perspective into this. I did ask David a moment ago about the general level of acceptability of Trump going up a notch or two compared to what it was 4 years ago or even 8 years ago. And curiously, what a lot of people said was they're worried about the wars, and they're worried about the knock-on inflation because of the wars. And they feel that the White House needs a strong man, and they feel like that Trump is the strong man who can possibly end the two wars. It may not play out that way at all. Trump might actually give an even bigger blank check to Netanyahu, certainly. We know his comments on the Russia-Ukraine war. But how much is Trump's support being driven by people who feel, the country's not in the right direction, it needs a strong man in the White House to deal with the problems both at home and abroad?
Well, first of all, I'm a political scientist. I'm a well-known tenured professor at a major research university. So this isn't just a Republican perspective as a commentator. I will say that Kamala Harris is essentially the incumbent, right? So she's had 4 years to direct the country. And so, although Trump was president, he is campaigning against the status quo. And so, of course, naturally, given that position, what he wants to do is point out all of the problems in American society. And that's actually not that hard to do from the perspective of many Americans. Inflation has been absolutely through the roof. People's paychecks just aren't worth all that much. So there are a lot of people struggling. Of course, under this administration, we've seen illegal immigration in ways that we never saw before.
Okay.
Some of it causally is directly related to some very prominent violent crimes, including just this past week, a shooting of a Jewish guy walking to synagogue in Chicago by an illegal immigrant. The Democratic Party has tried to downplay its causal role in terms of open borders, as well as the marked rise in anti-Semitism under under Biden and Kamala. And so the Trump administration or the Trump campaign is shining a flashlight on all of these problems. And what Kamala Harris is trying to do is say, things really aren't that bad. She's going to be essentially a continuation of Biden, and that there's absolutely zero policy daylight between her and the current president.
And Biden. Okay, let me also go across to Mr. Michael Owens. He's the mayor of the city of Mableton. Mr. Owens, I asked Brian of CNN this. While so much of the focus is on the top of the ticket fight between Trump and Harris, there are some very real issues that are down the line, down the ballot. For a city mayor like yourself, what is at stake really in this election? Because many are saying, I mean, this is the closest election in a generation. It's going to decide the future course of this country, not just for the next 4 years, possibly the next decade. And many people are not happy with the direction that the country is going in. And that's why Trump seems to have much more favorability today than he had 4 years ago or even 8 years ago.
Thanks for having me on, first of all. And, being a mayor of a city in Georgia, one of those in Georgia, we've had over 4 million people vote early. And you are right that this impact is being felt up and down the ballot. Those people that are running for state house, state senate seats are feeling that. Our congressional candidates are definitely seeing a boost from the much larger turnout. Now, one could argue, who is that helping, Democrats more, Republicans more? But without a doubt, the vice president coming into the race at the top of the ticket with the switch from President Joe Biden has been a huge boost in Georgia, and I think many of the battleground states as it comes to just moving that needle. I'm telling people, don't worry about the polling numbers, most of them within the margin of error. I think every single poll, for the most part, within battleground states are within the margin of error.
Yeah.
But we are seeing a larger turnout with candidates down ballot, and what they're doing is they're bringing their people with them. They're also able to link some of the most critical issues of the national campaign, particularly issues that Kamala Harris is talking about, and linking those to local races where it really matters. As a mayor, what really matters to me is that we have a commander-in-chief and a president that listens to mayors. And we're on the ground. We are the closest to running local government. And so it's important for us that whoever's in the White House is someone who's proven is going to listen to mayors, that's going to bring us in so we can directly help the people. And I don't hesitate for a second to say that the Joe Biden administration had done that, continued to do that. And I have no doubt that the Kamala Harris administration, if she wins, will actually continue that, because it's important for those of us who are mayors, those who are state representatives, school board members. You look at a lot of issues that are going on, and we have to tie them back to how they directly impact people. We're talking about affordable housing, how that's such an issue throughout America. When we talk about abortion and how women's rights to choose, that is impacting people. Those are things that are dinner table discussions, and I'm happy to see these issues being talked about with local candidates and with people, with mayors such as myself.
All right. Let me also go across to Professor Babonis. Like I said, this is such a closely contested fight between Trump and Harris. It essentially boils down to the half a dozen or so battleground states. Professor Babonis, what's your take? I know you're far away in Europe. You're vacationing right now, so thank you for joining us from the middle of your vacation. But what is really at stake in this election, according to you? And given those stakes, which way do you reckon this election is going?
The national polling is very tight between Trump and Harris, but that has to be seen in the context that in the previous 2 elections, national polls have dramatically underrepresented the true Donald Trump level of support and level of voting in the general election. That said, even if the voting were 50-50 in terms of the popular vote, that would probably be reflected in a crushing victory for Donald Trump, because the way the vote is structured in the United States, Democrats run up huge popular vote majorities in California and New York, while on the other hand, the Republican vote is spread more evenly throughout the country, with the result that if it really is a 50-50 election, it will be a runaway Donald Trump victory in the Electoral College. Now, if we believe that the true popular vote is much more like 51-49 in favor of Trump or 52-48, then we really could see a landslide. And that's something that I don't think a lot of political pundits are preparing for, the possibility that this might not be a very close election after all.
I'll just come back to you in a second on the battlegrounds, but Lisa's here, and I'll get a final word in with her before we let her go. So one of the points that Professor Babonis was making was, if you're a Democratic candidate, you want to be at least a couple, if not more, 3 or 4% above in the national popular vote, because there is an inherent sort of bias in the Electoral College system. His argument is that because the national popular vote is so close, it actually will lead to a decisive Trump victory in the Electoral College.
Well, I think we just can't say at this point. I don't think it matters as much what's happening at the national popular level. I think what matters is who is going to get those electoral votes in the 7 battleground states. Mm-hmm. And each one of those is too close to call. They're very close, some closer than others. Pennsylvania seems to be dead even. So I don't think we know one way or another what's
you don't
going to
think
happen.
that there's a knock-on effect from the popular vote to how it plays out in each of these battlegrounds?
I'm not a pollster, so I can't give you an expert opinion on that. I just know that it's really coming down to the electoral votes. That's the way the United States system works. Mm-hmm. What happens at the popular vote does not matter as much. It really matters, can they get those electoral votes? And that's why you see both campaigns, campaigning hard up until the very end, because every last vote matters. And, even the 2.6 million Indian American voters in the United States matter very much, because every single vote matters, and particularly in those battleground states that we've been talking so much about.
What about the Indian American community? They've generally tended to vote Democrat, but ever since Trump came, not in the first election, but certainly in 2020, and I guess in 2024 as well, a lot more Indian Americans seem to be sort of moving in his direction, but it is still predominantly sort of weighed in on the Democrat side, you reckon?
Well, I think Indian Americans do support Trump in fairly large numbers. I don't have the numbers at my fingertips, but people I talk to were very happy with the direction of the U.S.-India relationship during the Trump administration. And I think it says something that even if the votes are close between Indian Americans, the fact that you have, one of the candidates is Indian American, but still Trump polls very well among Indian American communities. That tells you, how much he was able to accomplish for the U.S.-India relationship when he was in power the first time around. And so I think, a lot of those Indian Americans see that. There may be personal issues, domestic issues they're voting on as well. Yeah. They probably tend to be wealthier Americans, so they may be more supportive of Trump's, policies on taxes and other issues. But I think if they're looking at the progress in the U.S.-India relationship, there's no denying that relationship was catapulted forward during the previous Trump administration. He has said that, Prime Minister Modi is a personal friend of his. Yeah. And so I think the expectation is that he would be really good for the U.S.-India relationship, and a lot of Indian Americans care about that.
All right, Lisa Curtis, we'll let you go. Thank you very much for trekking up all the way here to the Capitol Hill and joining us live on this show. Thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Right. So let me come back to the discussion, and really, it boils down to a couple of issues. One is inflation. Everybody agrees that this is a big Achilles heel for Kamala Harris. The immigration problem, which Trump and his campaign have said is the #1 issue. The southern border is broken, and Kamala Harris and Joe Biden are responsible for it. The one issue which is going and which is working for the Democrats is the issue of abortion. If you go by the Iowa Seltzer poll, that seems to be driving women, particularly college-educated white women, in a way that we haven't seen for a presidential election in a long time, and that's on the back of the Roe v. Wade Supreme Court verdict being overturned. But let me go back to our panelists. What does it mean for the rest of the